Welcome to the Brooklyn Podcast with yours truly, Anthony Puccio, my co-host, Colin Helwig. We've got a very, very special guest today, former Nets beat writer and columnist for WFAN. He now has his own Substack, Steve Lichtenstein. Steve, a dear friend. We covered the Nets from when they first moved to Brooklyn to now. What is your perspective on things? How have things changed? What are you thinking?
Well, first of all, again, I want to congratulate you on your engagement. I remember you way back when, and it's been just amazing to see the growth in you, and I'm really proud of where you've gone, and I'm happy to be here. You know, I'm doing okay as a person. As a Nets fan, I'm miserable. You know, I got some tangential good news yesterday. You know, with the Knicks doing what they did and making the Nets' future picks a lot brighter. But other than that, you know, it's being a Nets fan is very difficult these days.
Yeah. Now, our last podcast, we did a live reaction about the 8th pick, and I mean, I was disgusted. Colin was a little bit more optimistic, but he was still disgusted. I don't want to speak for you, Colin.
No, I was disgusted. I just I felt like we needed just a little bit of positivity in there. So I definitely did my best. Not the best, but I did my best to keep us afloat.
Yeah, well, you know, it's a lottery. I mean, your grand poobah kept saying that all year. You know, you can't rely on it. I know there's some people out there who are going to cherry pick the Sixers, and what a tremendous job they did. You know, they were the only team worse than the Nets to actually move up in the draft order. You know, number 8, you know, that's where they are. And it's just bad luck. And that's what the league intended when they flattened the odds back in, 2019. The worst team has never gotten the number 1 overall pick. And I would say in this particular draft, if you're not in like the top 2, you know, you're getting a pretty flawed player, you know, and it's going to be on, you know, your talent evaluators, your player development coaches, and again, more luck that the guy can stay healthy.
Do you, Steve, feel like it was worth the tank this year? I mean, this is something that we discussed a lot on this podcast too. They were 8 and 9, I believe, early in the season, and it's only 17 games through, but they had a group that could compete, and a team that made the play and ended up getting the number 1 overall pick, no matter which way you want to spin it. I mean, do you,
Right.
in your perspective, like, do you think it was worth this kind of? I believe you coined the term ethical tanking. And like, do you think it was worth this ethical tank that they did, or should they have gone more all in on chasing a play-in spot, or better yet, unethical tanking?
Well, I don't want to take credit for that. I don't think I did coin that, but as you know, you got to separate. You know, as an individual who is getting up in years, you know, I didn't like. You know, as much as the trade was a great trade, you know, you could love the return package from Mikal Bridges and what Mark's tried to do, but you know, to have another couple of 2 or 3 years chopped off my life before I see this team good again, you know, that's kind of difficult. But you know, from a basketball perspective, there are so many different ways to build a winner. For years I thought Indiana was ready to tank. That owner was constantly spending, you know, a lot of money on a roster that would always win like 44 games, you know, lose in the first round, maybe the second round. But then they stuck with it, and you know, look at where they are. They're in the NBA Finals. And then on the other end, you had Oklahoma City, who was horrible for 3 years, and you know, they got lucky in the sense that the player that they traded their asset, Paul George, for was Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So again, the lead guys on these 2 teams, they weren't top 3 picks. You know, I forgot where Halliburton went. He may have gone pretty high, maybe like 8 or so. I think Sabonis was Shai was like 11. I think Sabonis was like 11, which they used to get Halliburton. You know, there's just so many different ways to build a championship team. You look at the Knicks. I mean, they turned it around pretty quickly, you know, with Jalen Brunson. and a good coach. A good coach helped them really develop up to this point. People forget, like Julius Randle wasn't a really, he was a difficult player, good talent. Something was missing. He became an all-star. Jalen Brunson, good player. Nobody ever thought he was going to be an all-star. So coaching and development went a long way. So if you're asking me what I would prefer, I would prefer that the Nets always try to win, but it's not necessarily up to me.
Yeah. Did you catch yourself rooting for them this season though?
Absolutely, because I like Jordy. Rudy was a former player. I like Jordy. I think he's done. He's really shown a lot in terms of his ability to put guys in spots that help them develop. I mean, the Nets weren't good, but I'd be hard pressed to find another coach who would have made that team better.
Yeah. So Steve was anti-tank.
It wasn't really. I mean, I knew they were good, they were going to be bad, but for the people who thought that this was going to be like the worst team, I've told people back in October or November that this team was too good to tank. They had too many good veterans. They had, I didn't expect Cam Thomas to play only 25 games, but he was a good player. Their starting five competes. It was only until the end of the season when they just shut everybody down it became obvious that the goal was to lose.
So, Steve, I'll go to you first. Colin, you after. Steve, if you're Sean Marks, what are you doing this draft? Are you keeping all your picks and hoping to develop these guys next season? Are you looking to trade for a star and see if you could start nibbling at this rebuild a little bit? Are you looking to bundle some of these picks and try and move up into the lotto more? I mean, there have been things floating around about them moving up potentially to 2. I don't see that happening. That Staley had written today how they're looking to bundle Cam Johnson and the 19th pick to move into the top 10. If you're Sean Marks, what are you doing from your end?
Well, I think he should probably just not bundle. I think if I was Sean Marks, I would just take all the darts that I have and hope I land a bullseye on one. Historically speaking, trading up is not always the best option. Was it really Boston that or which one traded down, Philadelphia or Boston, when there was Fultz for Tatum or something like that?
Philly traded up, I believe, and Boston went back because they wanted Tatum. They knew Tatum was their guy.
Right, and Philly wanted Fultz.
Yeah.
Usually, the team that trades up on a percentage basis kind of regrets it. But it's also very hard in this day and age to find the right package because the picks in the 20s, are they going to move you up more than a couple of spots? The 19 pick could get you in the early teens with, other assets down the line if they gave up some of their own picks, not necessarily the Knicks picks.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very different. I would, if I was Sean Marks, I would trust my ability to evaluate talent. They did this whole series on Scout that I know a lot of people love. But really didn't tell us much of anything other than these guys seem to like each other. They're not going to tell us what's on their board, but I would trust the evaluation process and the development process. The more picks, the better. This year, they're not close. If they were close and they had a specific position, a specific player that they needed to target, I mean, I can't think of a position where I would say they really don't need to take that. And that includes center.
Yeah. I'm with you on that, Steve. I think their best bet is just keeping their picks, hoping that, like you said, they hit the nail on the head with one, find a gem. And I've kind of been going back and forth with some people about this. Like, I hate to use OKC as an example, but they kind of need to find their Jalen Williams before they go and get their SGA. And I know for OKC it was the other way around. They got their SGA before they got their Jalen Williams, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe so.
I think they need to try and find that guy this year. See if they do have something for Nets fans and for the team to feel good about, and also for the rest of the league to see. They drafted well. They have an emerging star in whatever slot that they take at. They're gonna have 5 chances at it. So I kind of feel like they need to find their Jalen Williams this year to the SGA before they could ever start chasing. Colin, I'll let you chime in and hop in here with your perspective.
Yeah, no, I agree with you guys. I was going to use the dartboard reference, just throwing five, and you're hoping one's a bullseye. So definitely on the same page. And I think there was a lot of chatter, not so much this week, but the week before, about the Nets moving up to 3, finding some sort of deal with the Sixers. And I think, again, I'll say I agree with you guys, but if there's a way to get into 1 to 2, that's not going to happen. But if there was a way, then it becomes a different kind of conversation, because I do think there's Cooper Flagg seems to be his own tier, and Dylan Harper seems to be his own tier. And I kind of agree with that. And I think, at least from what I've heard, there's a lot of other people who have studied these guys a lot more, who know a lot more than me. I think they would tell you the same. So I think that if there's an avenue to get into those, then you maybe think about bundling. Obviously, it depends on the price. But if it's 3 through 7, then I don't want to say not picking up the phone, because it's to be a good GM, you should always pick up your phone. But there's not much of a gap, I don't feel, between who you could get at 8 and who you could get at 3. So I think that's where you draw the line. And, no one likes a long rebuild, but I would even almost take it a step further. And, if a team comes calling and is like, you're looking at pick number 19 and it's, I don't know, the Knicks. We're probably done trading with the Knicks. But if it seemed like the Knicks, one of those guys who's like, hey, there's this guy sitting around. We've done our diligence. We really want this guy. And you can give them that pick. And then, you get 2 picks next year. You got 2 more darts to hug at the board in 2026. So that's the way I'm looking into it going into 2026.
Yeah, I mean, we're in that time of the off season, at least for the teams that are out, that we're seeing things being thrown at a wall. Like, I'm hearing rumors about, not rumors, but you read Twitter or whatever it might be, and it's like Cam Johnson and a couple of picks for number 2, number 3. I was a huge fan of Cam Johnson this year, but he's not going to move the needle for a lot of teams. That's in my opinion. He'll help a contender, but he's not going to be the main reason why they win a championship. I viewed Cam Johnson a lot like Mikal Bridges. Cam Johnson's not getting you 5 first-round picks. So I think we could put a lot of those rumors for Steve.
I never thought he was worth 5. I thought he could be worth 2 last year, but obviously March did not get the offer that he felt was and held on to him. So I made trade Johnson to get pick 2, but I just don't see San Antonio doing it. Yeah. Though they could, especially if they're also trying to trade Kevin Durant. For Kevin Durant.
Cam Johnson's the type of guy that you flip into a team as the 5th guy, the 4th guy, 5th guy on a championship team. I just don't see that being the scenario here. I don't think he's, quite frankly, I feel like I'm wasting my breath even speaking about this, but I have seen this a lot coming across my timeline a lot, where it's like Cam Johnson bundled with the 8th pick to move up, and I just don't think he's a good basketball player, not that good to get them in that top 2 into that next year.
Well, we were assuming that the number 2 pick is Dylan Harper, so the reason they have De'Aaron Fox, they have Castle. So Dylan Harper becomes a little bit superfluous, and it depends on their timeline what they want to do with it. So that's why people are looking at San Antonio for pick 2. I think Philadelphia at 3, Ace Bailey isn't really the consensus pick there. There are a lot of people who love him, and there's certain people who have questions. Harper is less. Has less of a spectrum on his evaluation. So that's why number 2 made sense if you were looking to trade Cam Johnson. And it could make sense for San Antonio based on their timeline, whether they wanted to go for it, get Cam Johnson, find a way to get Kevin Durant. They could do pick 8 and Cam Johnson for number 2, and then get they now have 8 and use that to get Kevin Durant. So that would make sense for San Antonio, whereas just drafting Dylan Harper, that's not really going to help them much for a couple of years, at least until they decide how to handle the glut.
So you think that there is a possibility? So
I
you're
don't.
saying there's a chance?
I'm saying it makes sense more than any other
Yeah.
for
I think
both sides. For both sides, it makes sense.
Yeah.
If that's that's the path. I don't know what San Antonio is thinking. They might want to grow as is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's almost what makes it frustrating is it does make sense and it is so close, but I do think at the end of the day, the San Antonio front office is going to realize that like Dylan Harper is just too good. His value right now, that number 2 slot is has too much value, and they're just going to draft him and they're just going to say, all right, you and Castle, let's see which one of you ends up being better, and then they'll maybe trade one of them in 2 years.
That's fair. I mean, like I said, but they might, if they have a timeline where they want to win now, they would make a different choice. But Colin, as you said, that scenario is also a high probability.
Yeah. Well, assuming they do stay at number 8, the Nets. Look, guys, I know maybe it's apples and oranges, but like a fantasy football draft, like being number 8 in a 12-man league is like you're like I don't even know who I'm gonna get. I don't know who's gonna be here, and they're in a similar situation. So, Steve, I'll go to you first. Is there anybody that you're kind of keeping an eye on? I know it's a little bit tough, especially with a lot of different mock drafts and players sliding up, players sliding down, but anyone you're keeping an eye on? And if you don't have a name, is there a type of player that you want to see them draft? Do you want to see them prioritize a point guard, a wing, center? Throw something at me. Colin, you go after.
Well, I did a mock draft article yesterday, and it was really based on who I thought would be there when they picked, not necessarily guaranteed to be there, but who I thought might be there. I couldn't take Jeremiah Fears, the point guard that a lot of people liked. So it was really between Malawach, the Duke center, and the French kid, Sanger. How do you pronounce his name?
A song.
A song. So I was looking at both, and everyone's talking about a song. He's got all this athleticism, this great wingspan, and he's so young. Malawach is 3 months older. He's got his standing reach is greater than Victor Wembanyama's. He's got a touch where he shoots 76% from the free throw line. If you're looking for upside with that pick, that's the pick if he's there. I mean, you could take. I had another article where I talked about floor versus ceiling. I think Malawach's ceiling is very, very high, but a guy like Con Knuppel, you kind of know that his worst would be like Corey Kispert. That would be the worst that could happen. But at best, he'd be a better version of Joe Harris because he has more ball handling skills and ability, to play make. The footwork is much greater. So that the ceiling is lower. So I went with Malawach with the number 8 pick.
Yeah.
And it allows you to trade Nick Claxton whenever you
Right.
get a good offer. Because, again, all these guys, 18, 19 years old, 20 years old, very, very few kids that age come in NBA ready. So you're talking another couple of years before you start to see fruit.
Yeah, this podcast, Pooch and I, we've been big fans of Malawach for several months now. So we definitely agree with you on that. I was looking at his song, and the only reason I've kind of leaned over into where he's starting to intrigue me just a little bit more is we talk about both these guys, how, you want a guy with like a high ceiling. And I agree. That's kind of why I'm not as excited about getting Khan. Even though the Nets ended up with the 8th pick, the dream was to get, a really like franchise cornerstone here. Cornerstone here. There we go. Third time's the charm. And when you do that, do you want that guy to be a center or do you want it to be a wing? And I'm of the position where I think if he can be a wing and his son can work on that handle, then I see that has a little bit more of there's a little more versatility to his game. There's a little bit, especially on the offensive end. He's got a lot to do in the half court. He's got a lot to do shooting the ball. He's a willing shooter, but not necessarily an efficient shooter, similar to Maluach. But when you can have a great wing over a great center, I'm always going to lean in the great wing. But I've also thought at the same time, the Nets are going to have so many ball handling opportunities. I mean, I can't even tell you the amount of times I wrote a story last year and I was like, well, the Nets came in again without a traditional point guard. And who knows? They got all this cap space. Who knows what they're going to do free agency wise? But I wouldn't close the book on Fears just yet because I do think he's a project. He's got a great quick first step. It's kind of going to be about figuring out what do you do after he gets through that first line defense and go from there. There's going to be a lot of development that needs to happen, but the quick first step is the thing that not a lot of guys have. It's not the easiest thing to do, so you can build off from that. So I think the Nets are a team where Fears could be a guy where they could come in, they could develop him, and then it could work out more than maybe a lot of the other teams who are picking around that area.
Yeah, I mean Fears was not available when I was going through my simulation. He could go 5, he goes 6, he goes 7.
He's a tough one, yeah.
I mean, if he falls, yeah, you have to take that into consideration. Again, as you said, it's going to take a while. I mean, is he better than Scoot Henderson was? I mean, people in Portland were ready to run him out of town the last couple of years, and he just started to get a little bit better this year. I don't know what his final numbers ended up, but that's what you're looking at. A couple of years where he's shooting sub 30% from 3, having difficulty, with turnovers because his decision making has been questioned. He's not a big guard, so he's going to have struggles on the defensive end. They're going to have to give him a lot of confidence in these first couple of years if he's the guy. But yeah, I could certainly see what you're saying about his ability to handle, get by people, and he did pretty well from the mid range, but finishing near the rim, not so much.
What do you think of Pooch?
I like Maluach. I mean, and Steve kind of took my points away. Like, we know that he'd be raw probably coming out of college, but gives you the opportunity to trade Claxton and take something back. If it's picks, if it's assuming salary and helping yourself for the future, while also prioritizing development for a big man. Now, Steve, I know for you, Colin, I'm not sure when you hopped on the Nets train, but Steve, you've been around quite a while. The Nets have never really had a dominant big. And during those Jason Kidd days, we really wanted one.
I can't even remember the guy's name. I was going to say Bill Wennington, but it wasn't. It was another
Todd McCullough.
McCullough, that's what I'm thinking.
Todd McCullough.
Yeah.
Todd McCullough, Jason Collins. Jay Kidd never had any bigs to really.
Right. Nina Kristich was, at the end.
Yeah.
Was the best that he got.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead. What was your question?
So maybe I'm just infatuated with that and the idea that they can develop a big of their own for the first time. I mean, they had Jared Allen. They developed him for a couple of years and then they traded him. Claxton, obviously, being a more recent case. We can say that Sean Marks has drafted bigs pretty well. And we could say that probably relatively confident. No. I mean, Claxton and Jared Allen, where he got them is not the worst picks.
But I'm not sure what your question is. But, yeah, I mean, the Nets' history with bigs hasn't been all that great. That was what was the missing link kind of in that 2021 year, where we had to have Blake Griffin. Their best 5-man guy was Jeff Green, in my opinion. Been going back to the Kidd days, and even before they had the older Dawkins and Mike Jaminski, and in the ABA days there was Billy Pulse. So but they never really had a guy like Maluach who is so raw that you could see him developing a 3-point shot, being multiple, not just a guy who was lobs and blocks. That's what I think. He didn't shoot very many threes at Duke, but it's not like he never shot them. There's this guy from France that people are mocking to the Nets. Some even in the first round. I can't believe it. Jean Berenger. Have you heard of him, Colin?
No, that's a new one for me.
I read something. He never took a jump shot. He's 19 years old, but that's a guy that you take with 36. And you stash and see what happens. Malwatch, I think, could be. I'm keep coming back to this. You know what Claxton and Allen and Dayron Sharp shot in college and from the free throw line was like 50%. They had no touch. Claxton took some threes, but he never really. He's kind of plateaued, in my opinion. He is what he is. The 3-point shot is always supposed to be coming. It never does. Same thing with Sharp. I want to see what they can do with a guy who is, not even 19 years old yet.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, Steve. I also feel that with Jeremiah Fears, I called him the sleeper before we knew where they were going to be picking. But the shooting, I think he shot 26.8% from three in college, and that concerns me because Jordy wants to chuck. They want to chuck all day.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, he's going to have a lot of ground to make up. And I think nowadays, if you're a point guard, you're a ball handler, like you don't have much time to kind of prove yourself before you're on your next team. If you fail during your rookie stint, you're not getting that big payday to give you that second chance to become a star and prove yourself. So the shooting really concerns me with Fears. That's just me. I think Malawach would be more of a safe pick. I personally don't think Malawach is falling to 8, though.
Well, I don't think Fears is falling to 8. I mean, too many people have him going, no worse than New Orleans. That's 7. They could probably use someone like that as well. Maybe even earlier. But again, nobody knows. I mean, Con Knuppel, I've seen where he went 4 or 5. Do they really? Who's running those teams?
Yeah.
So nobody really knows. That's why I said I think Malawach is the most likely because there are people who, he hasn't had a great pre-draft process. I don't know if it's because of the language barrier or, it just comes across a certain way. And maybe that will impact what Sean Marks thinks. But I've seen him go as low as 14, 15 because, he is raw and it will take time. And it's more of a ball handler's league, as Colin said.
Yeah.
So I think he'll be most likely to be available, not necessarily guaranteed to be available.
Yeah. Speaking of guys who've gone up and down, I mean, Trey Johnson is the one who I've seen as early as like 3, and then I've seen him back to like 9. I mean, I haven't watched nearly as much film on him because my gut for some reason tells me he won't be there. But if the Nets can get, I think who's like consensus, and if not consensus, close to consensus, the best shooter in the draft, you take him. That's at 8. You pat yourself on the back. That's a good day.
Of course, yeah. I think some people had him at 4 or 3 or 4, as you said. I haven't seen too many where he drops below the Nets, but yeah, again, nobody knows anything.
It's gonna be a fun night.
Yeah. And that's another reason why I don't think there's such a difference. Everyone's making a big deal, and Nets have 8. Some of these guys who are at 4, 5. I'm not a fan of Edgecombe, and he seems to be pretty much locked in at 4 by the consensus, not by everybody. I'm not much of a fan of his, but they're all flawed in some way after 1 and 2.
Yeah, and I mean, look, out of all the drafts that I've covered with the Nets, not that they ever had a high pick, but Marks kind of he made a lot of unpredictable moves. I mean, we prepped at Nets Daily for certain players and did studies, and Jared Allen, Claxton, like we never hit the nail on the head. So I was always surprised. I don't know about you guys, but I'm gonna move on to the next topic.
The only one I ever got right was Tariq Whitehead, I think.
Tariq Whitehead? That's impressive.
That is impressive.
But I do want to move forward, and we mentioned the documentary that they're running right now, Scout, and DJ Johnson was speaking, and I believe they were filming this in September. So he said something along the lines how they have 3 years to get this right, which means year one is out of the way. Steve, you first. Do you feel, or better yet, do you trust Sean Marks to succeed this rebuild in 2 years?
Do I trust him? Now, since he got the coach right, it puts puts a little more stock in that he can get this right. I mean, I think Kenny Atkinson was the right guy for the first rebuild. I think Jordy is the right guy for this one. Um, you know, I guess if he keeps the picks, um, I trust his ability to judge uh, drafted talent. And after that, I don't trust him at all.
Yeah. So you're saying that he buys that time, buys a couple of years with these young players, but once that they plateau after that, there's nothing after that that you trust.
No, I mean he just he has his you know I don't know that he'll allow Jordy to coach a team that will be on another level. Um, he's I use the term he uses the term collaborative process. He's very much involved,
Yeah,
and I can tell you just from knowing a little bit about the Knicks situation, that's really what it came down to—a power struggle. A lot of the NBA, it's kind of like high school where there's jealousies and who has the power. And right now when the Nets are terrible, Sean Marks has all the power. But when it came time for the Nets to really look into moving into the elite of the NBA,
yeah,
who did he pick? He picked a guy that he knew he could have power over in Steve Nash.
yeah,
Okay? He didn't really go for the coach that could really give them, this who really had the experience necessary to compete there. They may have won anyway if not for the injuries, but still, I think it was the wrong move. And then, afterwards, he took the Harden stuff way too personally.
yeah,
I would have kept him, and I call the Ben Simmons trade the original sin that really started the spiral downward. If you played chess and he had just let Harden, wait out the contract, let him play another year of the playoffs. By then, COVID was over and Kyrie would have been back, and they had KD and Kyrie and Harden for another playoff run. And if it's still underachieved and Harden left, they would have had all this cap space to get a new third guy. Instead, they saddled themselves with Ben Simmons, who I knew then was a terrible fit on this team. You can't play Ben Simmons unless you have like a Joel Embiid at center, who and after that, it was all downhill. It was a race to the bottom. And even
yeah,
now, he talked about the flexibility. There were people who were very upset that the Nets didn't tank harder because he kind of was a little wishy-washy. He made the trade for Dorian Finney-Smith to get worse, but he took back D'Angelo Russell, and the Nets were something like 8-9 in the first 17 games Russell played. What was Russell still doing on the team after the trade deadline? Other than helping the team win. That's that's being a little too wishy-washy. It's one thing to say you're flexible, it's another to really decide where you're
right,
going. And that's one of the things people always ask me, what are they going to do? Well, I don't know what they want to do. Do they want to win? If they want to try winning, they can try to make some trades to get better. But what's going to happen if they make a trade for a guy who's decent and then they start off like 7-11, which is mediocre, but not really in the Tankville area code. So, people are going to be all mad and like, why did he trade for them? And so I really don't know what they plan to do going forward, at least this year.
no, I'm with you. I agree. I think I trust him. I trust him to draft good young talent. I trust Jordy to develop that young talent. But I think after that, it's. I mean, you touched on a lot of good points. but particularly with James Harden, I think that was his biggest mistake as GM of the Nets. After that, with firing Kenny Atkinson, of course, which you also touched on, but
Hmm.
I don't
Yeah.
think that. Go ahead, Steve.
By the end, he didn't. Kenny Atkinson was starting to get a little power there, and him and
Yeah,
Marks could have saved Atkinson if he wanted to.
yeah,
Durant may have had some problems. Durant wasn't even playing then,
right,
and Kyrie is always bitching about something.
yeah,
So if Marks really wanted to, he could have saved Kenny Atkinson then. But he had Jock Vaughn. Jock Vaughn was a guy who owed his job to Sean Marks.
yeah,
He wasn't a Kenny guy. He was a Sean Marks guy from
right.
San Antonio.
And exactly, and that's what I was going to say. He brought Jock over from San Antonio. Jock wasn't really a Kenny Atkinson guy. He was a Sean Marks guy.
Mm-hmm.
And Sean, we know Sean likes to have control, as you mentioned. He micromanages, and he definitely has a hand in the style of ball that they play. Hence why I don't think that they've really ever had a true big. Like he's really played them small. Colin, I'll go over to you. I've said enough.
Yeah, I mean, Sean Marks is a rebuilding GM. He's got close to an A plus. Sean Marks as the managing a superstar led, championship contending team. It's kind of an F. I mean, there's really no other way to sell it. Like you let 3 Hall of Famers walk out the door in the matter of a year and a half. So yeah, you trust them to build the team if you're going to base your opinion on what you've seen, which I think that's what we're all kind of getting at here. So
Yeah,
yeah, I trust them to hit on the draft picks thus far at this point at least, and then we'll go from there. It's an interesting conversation. We talked about the Jordy hire too, and will he be the coach when they have like star talent in there? If he's a power guy and things like that, and the power you get from star players, and it's just I can't help myself thinking about what does it even mean to be the coach of a contending team? Does it mean you're going to be fired in a year if you don't win the championship? Because that's what it looks like we've been seeing around the league as a whole right now.
yeah,
So I guess I don't have anything else to say except other than it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, and if there are going to be moves between Sean or like Jordy or things like that, it's I don't think anything's going to happen until a couple of years from now. It's not exactly a hot take, but it's just kind of where we're at.
yeah. Well, you get through that first step, and then when it's time to elevate and become a championship contending team. He failed his first time around. Whatever way you want to spin it, and you want to talk about COVID, whatever the circumstances were, they failed. It was a colossal failure, and it is what it is. Now, bring up that Scout series that they filmed, and BJ Johnson, who they really love. I want to read this quote and see what you guys think, your perspective here. He said in episode 2, a lot of work went into what Brooklyn is going to be in the future, and regardless of who comes in here, we're not going to change. They've got to adjust to us. Overall, that's what it's about here. So, me personally, I get the impression almost like they're scarred from the Big Three era, which is understandable. But at one point or another, like you have to get a superstar. And what it sounds like to me is they're kind of boxing in with that quote that the only criteria of a superstar that they could have in Brooklyn is one that they draft that's homegrown, and that is very difficult. I mean, that's every GM's dream is to draft a superstar, right? So I guess my question to you guys is, you know, is there such thing as a superstar who doesn't change a team's culture or doesn't change their identity? Like, are they being realistic? And perhaps am I overlooking this quote? Because I really feel they actually feel that way. They don't. They're so scared of what happened with KD, Kyrie, and James Harden that they're super reluctant. And we keep reading in the headlines Brian Lewis, Plan A, Giannis, because he is the perfect superstar to fit this culture. But Giannis has had 5 different head coaches in Milwaukee. So I mean, is there a superstar that comes to mind? Is there a recipe? I feel that it leads to a lot of the points that we were just discussing, and BJ Johnson is very highly regarded in that front office. So I'm not taking that quote lightly.
Well, I don't know. I honestly don't know what he meant by that because, if someone became available like a Giannis, they would certainly try to go get him if they could. in my personal opinion, Giannis, it doesn't make sense on either side. And this year, for Giannis to go to Brooklyn, I don't know why he would want to come to a bare bones operation if he wants to win. He might as well just stay where he is.
Right.
And if he could go to the Knicks if he wants New York. I'm sure they could arrange a trade, around Karl Anthony Towns and maybe a pick and maybe a third team to add other picks. There's certainly teams that are in high profile areas that he could pick other than Brooklyn. And the Nets would certainly welcome him if he wanted to come here. I don't know. There's just not many. I think I saw one of your tweets. There's just not many superstars around that one becomes available. You have to investigate, and if it makes sense at the time, you do it. You pull the trigger, and you think about culture later.
Yeah. What do you
Because
think, Kyle?
superstars, when you're talking about the top 5 players in the game, and I don't even throw in guys that are older like LeBron James and Steph Curry,
Yeah.
They've earned the right, to pick and choose where they want to play and who they want to play with. That's part of the player empowerment.
Yeah.
And I think, the Nets would have to be accommodative of that, no matter who the superstar they go after is.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it's a players' league at this point, and you gotta let them change it or be in charge in some capacity. That's just the way it is right now. But I do think we're crossing things here a little bit between free agency and the draft, because as far as I understand it, scout is about they're looking for young guys to bring in. It's a draft series, and what did BJ said? He was like, they need to adjust to us, not the other way around. If
Yeah.
you're letting a 19-year-old kid in there say this is how we're going to do things, then that's a whole nother problem. You know what I mean? So I think he was talking about guys that were looking at draft. We want people that will come in and play Brooklyn Nets style basketball, not someone who will be hesitant to it, rather than saying like, all right, we need to find specific superstars. Now, I do think, you go through an experience like the Nets did with the big three, there are certain lessons that you learn in terms of how tight you want to keep the leash on those guys. I don't like using that analogy, but in terms of how much you want to value culture is a buzzword, but culture and your principles over, letting the players, have that power and do what they want. So I think there are lessons learned, but the BJ quote, I wouldn't read in too much to it, because I do think they're talking about prospects and kids.
Well, but even with draft prospects, it kind of goes back to what Steve was mentioning before. Like, Sean Marks likes having control. Like, it's very at least it indicates that they want full control over the situation. They don't want things to get out of hand. And Joe Tsai has said it himself. He doesn't want another situation like the Big Three where he has to deal with these major egos. But one, super teams are kind of done. But with that being said, but it kind of just gives you an, a look into how the front office thinks and how much they really truly value their culture, like this idea of culture or identity or whatever it might be. When at the end of the day, Colin, you just said it, the superstars run the league one way or another, and they're the ones that are going to win you the championship. So you're right. Maybe that was taken out of context, but for me, I'm seeing it like, I don't know. They've got to adjust to us. I mean, yeah, no kidding. If you're drafting them, they better adjust to you. I mean, it's just not going to work for either party.
Yeah, there's not many. I don't know how many 19 or 20-year-olds are going to tell, Jordy Fernandez how to run practice, or that he needs the ball more, or anything of that, or that they're being worked too hard. I don't know that happens that often. I mean, there are some cases where guys don't come across well in interviews, or maybe they interview well and afterwards you find out they're kind of a jerk. I can think of Trae Young as an example. When he was young, he was kind of despised on that Atlanta team for the way he would mock the referees with the foul baiting, and that it's kind of hard to find, but that's why they do the interviews. But I don't know. I've done poorly on interviews and gotten a job, and I've done well on interviews and was passed over. So I don't know how that's going to work. How that works in the NBA.
Well, shifting across the river, not Knicks for clicks. It's relevant. The Nets have their picks, so we're going to talk about it. I want to hear, Colin. You go first. I want reactions to the Knicks falling out of the Eastern Conference Finals. Mikal Bridges being a little inconsistent in the playoffs, and Tom Thibodeau getting fired. You know, is this a time that Nets fans should be celebrating, or should they be staying humble, in your opinion?
I mean, from a Nets fan's perspective, I feel like this is your chance to break the cycle of saying, "Oh, why are you so obsessed with us?" Just like the Knicks were doing the same thing, kind of celebrating the Nets' failures when the Big Three collapsed. And that wasn't even out of picks; that was just out of pure spite. But everything everyone has said throughout this Knicks Nets, really just whatever you want to call it, since the McHale trade, is that the Knicks window lasts more than this year. So I think, why you can be glad that, your rival didn't win the championship, but
Yeah.
I don't think it's you're not out of the woods yet, to say the very least. And while I do think it's a very volatile league, and with that, it's more likely than not that some of those later picks are going to be higher than Knicks fans would want to admit right now. You still got a long way to go. So I don't think it's time to celebrate or really do anything of that sort. It's what happened to the Knicks is funny, because if you had told them 6 months ago that they would beat the Celtics in the playoffs, their fans would have been like, "Oh, so we made it to the finals, right?" And then you just be like, and they'd be like, "Right?" And you're like, "No." So it's, you did like the thing that was, you beat cleared the big hurdle that was right in front of you. But I don't want to call the Pacers a tiny hurdle, because they're a lot better than a lot of people thought, or a lot of people thought they were going to that series if you paid attention to them. But
Yeah.
you tripped over maybe what was the smaller hurdle in the heads of a Knicks fan who didn't watch the Pacers too much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I told a Knicks fan that when this was before Thibodeau was fired, that when people look back at the year, they're going to see, this was a pretty good year, a step in the right direction. We grew from year 1 to 2 to 3, but they're also going to look at it as a missed opportunity, because how often does a 3 seed get the home court advantage in the Eastern Conference Finals? So I was kind of shocked that the Knicks did that. And it's just crazy, in my opinion. I mean, I don't know what do they expect the new guy to do? They're really gonna win a championship the way this team is constructed? They weren't the better team in that series, talent wise. Thibodeau, he got a lot out of pretty much everybody. I'd say, other than Mikal Bridges, everyone improved from the prior year. So what more can you ask from a coach than the team got better? And if they think a guy who's going to coddle them, like this guy Bryant, who is he? I mean, you think what's going to happen? Towns, he's going to coddle Towns. That's okay if you miss some things on defense. You got your 20 and 10. That going to help them win games, especially in the playoffs. I mean, Towns, I remember him getting pulled a lot in crunch time of playoff games last year. So, and they just went with Gobert. Someone was like, why didn't he go with the two bigs sooner? I mean, Robinson played 17 games during the regular season and wasn't in shape. So they had to make sure that at least one of them was on the court at all times. So maybe next year, if they had Thibodeau, they would have been, another 50-win team and, competitive in the playoffs. Boston could be on the way down. I'm hearing that, that they don't want to spend all this money. I think someone like Holiday is a guy that you should watch this summer, see if he is moved. Porzingis as well. They'll have Tatum and Brown, and they'll have all the other shooters. So, but maybe they won't be as deep as they've been.
Yeah, I mean, the East is wide open. They at least won't have Tatum this year, and that was the East being, or next year, because of the Achilles.
Regular season, yeah.
Yeah, the East being so wide open is what baffled this move the most to me. Like, you clearly have a coach who's able to get you in that you're right there position, and from what we see now, it's going to be a wide open East again next year. How often has a rookie head coach been able to elevate a team the way Thibodeau did, and then ideally in this situation, if it wasn't good enough this year, elevate it further to get yourself to the finals. It's almost like you're pulling yourself back a step, where it's like, all right, not only do we have to get back up there, but we gotta establish our coach now. And it was like you already had that. Now you're adding
Yeah.
another step.
And if they don't take another step next year, then they start thinking about, well, we're going to have to break this up and try a different way. And that's where, Nets fans, I don't want to say have joy, but they have some hope that the better picks are, that the later picks are going to be of better value. Because, what happens, do they not re sign Bridges? Do they trade Josh Hart? Does Brunson get mad and want out? These things can happen. They may get
Yeah.
tired of Towns, because he's a great scorer, but he was picked on again when it mattered on the defensive end. So I don't know what will happen, but they put themselves in a risky boat by being a little rash. And again, this was all about power. This was about the jealousies in upper management who want to control things. I mean, World Wide West should just coach the team. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the bottom line. He didn't want Josh Hart. I don't think he wanted OG. These are Thibodeau kind of guys, and they really helped the Knicks gradually build to where they got to. And it's hard to take the next step, but I think firing Thibodeau was a step in the wrong direction.
Yeah. I mean, they missed a huge opportunity this year to at least make the finals.
Mm-hmm.
No matter how good Indiana was, this was the Knicks series to lose. And once they got past Boston, I thought they were headed right to the finals. And I was naive for underestimating Indiana. But we're in that weak link era, especially in the Eastern Conference, when I mean, it's wide open, and especially with Tatum out for most of that series, I felt like they needed to do it this year. I'm not saying that they're going to implode or that their window shortens per se, but I felt if there was going to be a year to do it, this was going to be it. Now, that being said, I've been a huge Tom Thibodeau fan from the day they hired him. I know the team looked a lot different, but he built them. He built them from the ground up, and they are where they are. Whether you agree with his tactics or not playing the bench, whatever it might be, overworking these guys, they were there for a reason, and he was their leader. He was there right as soon as Jalen Brunson, right before Jalen Brunson was even there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look,
And then Leon Rose,
right. They've gotten, as I said, they've gotten better. The players individually and the team
right,
collectively have gotten better every year. That's
right,
and they haven't. I don't know. The one thing I would argue though is that when you said this was going to be their year, I think it's OKC's year.
Well,
I
no, in the
It was their
Eastern
year to
Conference,
get. It was a missed opportunity to advance, but I
yes,
do think that I don't know that Indiana can stay with OKC with that kind of defensive pressure.
That's
yeah,
the best defense statistically in NBA history. Like if you want to look at like the super like sabermetric numbers like that, it was a competition
okay,
to see who was going to get smoked.
yeah. I meant more on the
I won't.
Eastern Conference side.
Yeah,
At least to make the finals. I thought
right.
this has got to be the year, especially if they get past Boston. There should be nobody that stops them. But again, I don't think it justifies firing Thibodeau. Everybody always wants to find the scapegoat, and I don't think they found the right one.
Right.
But a message for Nets fans is that the Knicks won just as many playoff series this season alone as the Nets have won since they moved to Brooklyn. So stay humble.
Right.
Like really,
Yeah, I don't have any. I don't have any Schadenfreude here. There's, as I said,
No.
my whole point was about playing it out into the future that maybe they break it up if they don't win with the new coach,
Right.
and that therefore will make the Nets picks that were originally the Knicks more valuable. So,
Yeah.
I watched the games. I didn't turn it off when they were winning,
No.
in disgust because I'm a Nets fan. I
No.
grew up when Julius Erving and Walt Frazier were the coolest guys on the planet.
Yeah.
Walt is still one of the coolest
Walt
guys.
is still the coolest guy. He's still the coolest guy in the room, Steve.
I don't forget. One time I told him you're styling and beguiling, and he said, "I'm going to use that."
I haven't seen him at any games. I mean, I haven't been to many games, but
Yeah,
he doesn't cover road games anymore.
right.
So, look, I thought they also strayed away from Tibbs' style when they traded for Cat, but I don't think we need to fall down that rabbit hole. I think
Well,
they had that gritty, tough player in Randall already who fit Tibbs' style perfectly.
but I think
I thought,
it was an adjustment to Porzingis. They wanted to match up with Porzingis, and it
yeah,
turned out Porzingis, he had this illness all through that series, so he
yeah,
wasn't as much a factor. But it did help them deal with Boston with all their shooting. The Knicks were able to match. That was a counter to the loss the previous year to Boston.
yeah.
So not a loss to Boston. The fact that how Boston won the title. Knicks lost to the Pacers last year, but
Yeah.
that was what they were thinking when they got Cat. And he was a Kentucky guy, so World Wide West wanted him.
That's a good point. I didn't even think of that, Steve. But we're all in agreement. Nets fans should just stay humble for right now, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm miserable. It's just they're going to
Yeah.
be terrible again, and if they're not too terrible, people are going to be upset. It's the worst of all possible worlds. They can't be bad enough, and for some, and then they're not going to be good enough for others.
You know what though? At least this upcoming season, and it's not to be overly optimistic, but at least we'll have some young guys to look forward to watching if they're losing. Like this past season was miserable for me personally. Like it was like we're not really watching anybody develop great besides Cam Johnson, who decided to go nuts. But Cam Thomas was out all the season basically.
Clowney was out a lot.
Right, Clowney was out. Claxton, in my opinion, regressed. So we didn't really have much to look forward to. It was like D'Angelo Russell got traded to the team, and yeah, for nostalgia, it was fun. But otherwise, what are we doing here? We're getting excited over Jalen Wilson, and it's no disrespect to him or any of the other guys that came up from the G League, but it's like at least this upcoming season we have some prospects to watch.
Yeah, well, they'll be
One
he'll
thing
be
I
on
got
guaranteed contracts as opposed to 1 year with a team option.
right, right. So that's my one glimmer of hope right now in Nets world. Um, but yeah, no pom poms out here, or going back at Knicks fans. So I do want to make it on a lighter note and then start closing this thing out. But Steve and Colin, this upcoming season is the 50th anniversary since the Nets won an ABA championship. The last championship in their history. Their second. It doesn't count in the NBA records. It was also the ABA's last season. So that was 1976. This is going to be the 50th anniversary. I just wanted to keep it light. Ask you guys, do you think they should celebrate it? And is there any ideas that you have that the Nets, the NBA can do to kind of embrace the ABA or that New York Nets team?
The NBA or the Nets? The NBA, I think I saw you say something about a red, white, and blue ball. That's not going to happen. But they can have the throwback jersey, a special night where they welcome back the Bill Melchionis, maybe even Dr. J. One of my favorites was Larry Keenan. I think he played there maybe a year or so. But yeah, there's guys who are still around that they can get. Yeah, they should celebrate it.
Yeah.
There are a lot of. It was New York Nets. They weren't even the New Jersey Nets. They played at Nassau Coliseum. I went to a few games. I love Dr. J. I couldn't play like him, so I grew my hair like him back then.
We got to get pictures of that, Steve.
They exist. They're buried here. I can make sure my wife keeps them buried. But yeah, I mean, there was a lot of fun. I mean, I started watching the Nets Rick Barry's year, and I ran into Rick Barry when I was helping my sister at Joe Namath's Golf Foundation. He was one of the players, and I told him about that season where they went to the finals. He says he remembers it more than the wins. He said the loss and how they, how Ollie Taylor. He went to Ollie Taylor and said, "Don't let them shoot a three." And they shot a three and they got a steal and won a game that turned the series around. And then Barry said he got hurt for Game 6, and Indiana won that. I think it was the 1972 ABA Finals. Yeah, so I go back a long way with the New York Nets, and I would love to see them celebrate that kind of history. Not just the New Jersey Nets with
Right.
the putting up Jason Kidd's jersey or Super John Williamson's jersey. Well, actually, Williamson played on that '76 team too.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was that's how I got my start as a Nets fan, and I would love to see them celebrate it.
My proposal on Twitter was, yes, when they play other ABA teams, maybe they throw the red, white, and blue ball in. I know that's not going to happen. I know it's not going to happen.
Yeah,
It would be cool though if they had an ABA night and they did that for one game. They
maybe
wore the
during
different
warm up.
jerseys.
Maybe
Yeah,
during warm up.
yeah. At least all right, fine. If not the red, white, and blue ball, then bring the stars and stripes jerseys back.
Yeah,
The
throwback.
Dr. J
I
throwback.
mean, it's one more thing they could sell.
Exactly. It works both ways. It's a win-win.
Yeah.
Colin?
Yeah, I mean, the NBA wouldn't upend any part of their scheduling just because it's an anniversary for the Nets, and I believe there's how many is it? Like 6 former ABA teams are in the NBA right now. If
Yeah.
you can make that one of the groups for the NBA Cup for the NBA play, and that's a way you can get them all involved. I think that would be kind of interesting.
Cool.
It's a shame they brought back they did the ABA jerseys 2 years ago, because I feel like that would have been the easy answer right now if you're looking for something that, something you can weave in easily and like have it be their alternate jerseys. Those weren't the city edition, but they were alternates that year. So that'd be a cool way to do it. I will say this, I'm going to speak directly to the Nets Twitter guys who are always fighting about something. Just, if the Nets do celebrate this and make a big show out of it, the rest of the NBA will clown you for saying you're doing this because you don't have an NBA championship to celebrate. So prepare yourself.
It's a 50th anniversary. It's not like a 45th anniversary.
Yeah.
The only thing I would add though is that the NBA, you got to remember, did not like having to merge with the ABA. They did it out of necessity to get the Julius Ervings and Moses Malones who were signing for bigger contracts. The ABA was going bankrupt, and that was 4 teams: the Pacers, Nets, Nuggets, and Spurs ended up in the NBA, and the Spirits of St. Louis got 1/7 of 1% of NBA TV money in perpetuity. So they made out the best out of everybody.
Yeah. Well, actually, I'm sitting here saying that maybe we should celebrate it, but maybe we shouldn't, because isn't the merger what screwed them with Dr. J?
Well, Roy Bowe, who owned the Islanders as well as the Nets, he just couldn't afford Dr. J and the fee to the Knicks for invading their territory. So it's not that the merger screwed the Nets. It's Roy Bowe couldn't come up with the money. They had Tiny Archibald as well that first year. They could have had Julius Erving and Tiny Archibald, who was still one of the, at the time, still a pretty good player. Instead, I think Bubbles Hawkins led them team in scoring or something like that.
Well, nice trip down memory lane. Thanks for that, Steve. Anything else that you want to get off your chest in the Nets world for Nets fans, or whatever it might be?
I'll just follow me on Substack, Steve Lichtenstein .substack. I appreciate all my subscribers and all those who read my columns and give me comments, good and bad. And I thank you, Pooch. It's been great seeing you and chatting with you. Congratulations again as you mature in front of my very eyes. It's been a long time. Great news.
Thanks, Steve. Steve, for those who don't know, was one of the first people I met down at Barclays Center when I started covering the team as a credentialed media member. I was 18 years old, and he took me under his wing and really helped me out, whether it be life talks or journalism, whatever it might be. So, Steve, it was an absolute honor and pleasure to have you on here today, and we appreciate your friendship first and foremost. So
And
thank you for
Colin,
everything
it's
you
good
do.
to meet you. I stopped covering the team after KD's foot was a little bit too big, and I didn't get to see you and all the other new Nets Daily guys around Barclays Center. But it's good to meet you. Thanks for having me on.
Of course, yeah, you as well, Steve. It was great to meet you. I know I've been following you on Twitter for some time now, so I see you out there engaging in the Nets world. It's definitely good to finally put a name to the face, even if it's behind a screen. So, and yeah, we appreciate those kind words.
Yeah. We'll have to do it again, Steve.
Whenever I'm around.
Yep. You'll be getting a call from me. In the meantime, for those of you that stuck around, we appreciate the support. You can follow us at the Brooklyn Pod on X, Instagram, TikTok, or you can email us questions, concerns, comments, thebrooklynpod@gmail.com. So, Steve, Colin, thanks both. Everybody, have a good rest of your night.